Hello, I'm Josh.
I'm Josh.
I'm not Josh.
And I'm not Jamie, but together we are
Joshing around in air. Oh, so smooth, guys. So smooth. Welcome back to our third and sadly final episode with our friend Jamie. Actually, yeah, should we just go ahead and do the beverage? What have you got for us today, Sam?
I've basically brought along fizzy apple and blackcurrant squash. That's what it tastes like anyway, as you'll see.
Yeah. Love that.
Get the ASMR element in, so everyone feels like they're in the room with us.
I feel like that's one of our selling points. Beautiful.
Thank you.
It smells like me being 16. That's what it smells like. It's like Strongbow dark fruit, but nice.
I'm getting nostalgia for Calpol, I think it's.
It looks like Ribena as well, actually, or Vimto.
Yeah, Vimto, that's it. Yeah. It's this is a little bit more, I don't know. It's a bit more.
You know, dare I give a spoiler for this episode, but this purple is giving me very Old Dominion vibes.
And while we're having a sweeter drink than often we would go for, I've also brought along some a little gift for you all.
Oh,
A little sweetie. Yes.
nice.
I've been to Portugal recently, and I brought back some caramelos de leite. Do we have any dairy allergies in the room? No. Good.
Because we'd be in for a bad time otherwise. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is this going to be one of those really chewy sweets, so then we're just going to be not able to talk for the next 5 minutes? They can just listen to us chewing.
I'm gonna have to edit this podcast.
It's going to be a worse one yet.
We do a really good job on this podcast, and we talk about it often, about creating content that works super well in an audio-only format.
Yeah.
Yes, look into the diagram here we've drawn.
It's going well.
The second layer of paper inside the wrapper.
I know.
That's exciting. I've never tried these.
Makes me feel real fancy. So, Sam, what is the actual? I realise we never said the name. What is the drink you brought us? Oh, I tell you what, I can read it. Thatcher's apple and blackcurrant. There you go.
Yeah, it is a cider.
Apple and blackcurrant cider.
It is an extremely sweet one. I mean, it is quite similar to drinking Vimto.
Yeah.
You know, squash mixed with lemonade. And as I'm a father of 4 boys, the oldest of whom is 11, and so this kind of smell is extremely common in my house. Yeah, bit of Calpol, some squash.
Yeah. All of those vibes.
Reminds me a lot of Snakebite at uni. Going to Portsmouth uni, like purple was their like uni colour. So like a purple Snakebite was just what they served absolutely everywhere. It was, they used to do like big 2-pint cups of it at the Union. And yeah, it smelled exactly like that.
The question is, how much was it?
Do you know what? I want to say it's less than £5. I remember like, and I not even that old, but I remember at uni being able to just about get £2 pints. Like £2, £2.50, which like the other day I was in London and I ordered a Guinness and they charged me £7.50. And like the fact that like I was like, that sucks, but like wasn't like like as a uni student I would have been offended. Like that would have been like being slapped in the face. But you know, it's something about just living in London just grinds you down, just accept it. Like take my money I worked for.
Well, I just assumed that when you said that much, it was probably a half.
You know, I'm from Sheffield originally. I moved down to London for uni, and in Sheffield at the time, at least, it was extremely common to have pound a pint nights.
Oh,
That was like the thing on a Friday night. Pound a pint, excellent. So you'd go out. I'd take £5 with me. It's £1 to get into town and back on the bus. I'm going to get 4 drinks. That's So that was what it was meant to be. And then I came to uni and it was £1.65 for the cheapest beer. And I thought I was being so ripped off as a student. And I caught myself. I went to the FA Cup semi-final at Wembley. And I think it was £6 for a Guinness. And in my head, I thought, that sounds very reasonable to be at Wembley and drinking.
You have assimilated
into
the West London life.
Oh,
it's all a bit anyway about how good the things were in the old days as we get ready to discuss the Old Dominion.
There you go.
This is my last episode, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, we're gonna have to have you back, mate. Honestly, this is brilliant. I don't even have to lead on to the next topic. Guys, we have a listener question, and this is from my good friend Alex Berry, who absolutely smashed me at LGT, and I still have nightmares about it, but he's a very nice chap, so I'll let him off. But it's a great question. Right, here we go. Hi guys, love the show, especially happy hour bevies at the start. Yes, the true happy hour Conquest event. Very interested to hear more of your thoughts on the February OD changes. I stopped playing Old Dominion after the LGT, but Parabellum seem to have remedied their competitive flaws around early game scoring, and then some. I've realised that at 1,500 points, it's harder to gauge balance, but the sense I get from your report of Bad Moon, that's the tournament we went to last time, was that it was much easier to get ahead and stay there with the faction's natural resilience. Also, Sam's tone belied how he and I feel about facing them now. Worried that they were oppressive for new players before the changes, but now, yikes. Keep up the great work. Look forward to the next episode. Thank you very much, Alex. That's a great question. I feel like there's several points he's made in there. There seems to be a mention just in general about the February OD changes, how they've changed early game scoring, which I think is a big thing, and then also how how the dynamic with 1,500k points seems to work.
Well, I should just kick us off from one of the February changes. So not to go too deep into stats and stuff, but just to give people a quick summary. Old Dominion have an army rule. The army rule used to be you give this item to your warlord and they get you a dark power per turn. Now it's just blanket. Every turn you get 1 dark power, and you also add 1 to your dice rolls. So it means rather than needing 2s to get your mediums on turn 2, you need 3s. So again, help with them being a bit more of a later game army. They made the Fallen Divinity a heavy, but she comes on as a light. So that was just impactful because it meant she was worth 3 stands rather than 2 for objectives. She also got an extra wound. They took a wound from Varangians, gave it to Bucephaloi. So, which is
zombie
nice.
cows.
Yeah, just nice. Mixed up what was the kind of stronger units, made the heavies a bit more balanced. The big change to the Strategos was the fact that now, again, it could act as a light for reinforcement rolls, basically mean you could bring it on turn 1 with some mediums. Again, really helps with that kind of early game pressure. And then the biggest change was the Legionnaires, which kind of the whole army is a staple of the army. They dropped them to 100 points, and they made the standard bearer give them +2 to their second march, so move a bit faster. And then they changed their memories of old. So previously it used to be they'd get phalanx, basically become a little bit tougher. Now what they've done is they've made it so the command stand counts for 2 additional stands when seizing objectives, which is just fantastic. So I think you want them to die, and what it does is it makes a little 100-point unit annoying, because there's been way too many games where I would just march them onto an objective, steal it from another kind of minimum scoring unit, and then they are forced to try and kill my unit that I want to die. Mm-hmm. And
they
so
have also dethroned Men-at-Arms as the cheapest scoring unit in the game, which I'm so salty about.
Yeah, so those were the kind of changes, and although it's only kind of 6 changes, I think they've made a massive difference to Old Dominion. Particularly, I think the character, usually people are always running Ziliarchs. He had kind of some better options and was just stronger. Now this gives you a really competitive reason to run the Strategos. And I think Legionnaires have completely changed their function, but they've really found their place in the army. They're now, you want to run them, they're annoying, they get in the way. People are now kind of forced to kind of kill them to stop them stealing objectives.
Yeah. And even one stand is still 3 stands for scoring. So even if you're 1 stand against an MSU, you're still you're stopping them from scoring.
It is, it's beautiful as an OD player. It's, I'm sure, horrible to play against. But yeah, I think, fantastic changes that have really turned Legionnaires into something that, you want to run a few of, but even in a way where they're still quite expensive to add additional stands, so no one really runs bricks of them. They are these like little MSUs that you want to run around, be annoying, and get killed off. And I think they've really found their place and their function.
I think going back to Alex's question as well, talking about remedying the flaws around early game scoring, it's worth seeing that in the context of the wider game that changed in February as well, because as Old Dominion's early game potential went up for scoring, they did knock back some of the other factions as well. Couple of things changed. One, getting rid of short edge deployments. Every time I played as a Wadron player, every time I played against Old Dominion on short edges, it was playing on easy mode, because Old Dominion took so long to get to scoring elements when there was so much of the board to cross that a fast army just ran riot. But the big one was taking away the ability to smuggle heavy or medium characters into light units. Which so many factions, I did it too, but Nords were doing it, Wadron were doing it. Loads of these factions had ways to skirt.
Sneaking a Theist Priest into a unit.
It's Spires, force-grown drones with a high clone executioner in the middle. That was the way.
Yeah, so what we saw is Parabellum taking back a lot of that lights being able to score. So the ability to project that scoring on turn 2, when you advance on turn 1, then score turn 2, isn't really as accessible. There's a couple of places that can do it, but not many. Combined with Old Dominion having a very powerful turn 3 scoring presence with these little 3 stands, 100 points that actually count as 5, which means to stop, even just to hold even on scenario in that early turn, you need to put 5 stands into that unit. You can't put a monster in, that won't work. So you have to commit very heavily in a place you may not want to. And that's on top of Old Dominion getting stronger as the game goes on. So it's much harder to get that early scenario lead against Old Dominion because other factions have had their tools turned down a bit, which was, I'd say, good for the game. But now the early scoring is in that turn 3 kind of space. Old Dominion really excel with Legionnaires.
It's massive. And also the Strategos coming out turn 1. Last tournament I ran in with a block of 5 Praetorian. So by turn 2 I'm sitting, at 6 stands on an objective of a unit that's very hard to kill. It won me a lot of games by the fact that I'm a late game army who was the first to score, and that was that definitely felt incredibly strong.
Especially because you're coming on so early. Again, talk about smuggling on scoring units in turn 1. Old Dominion was one of the few armies that got to keep that. And because if you just march all the way, yes, getting onto a zone is scoring, but if you can push past the edge of the zone, so you're now scoring the zone, and if someone comes into you, they're not contesting, they've now got to clear 6 stands of Praetorians before they're even getting through you into that zone. And that, as you probably found, I'm sure, just locks down a zone for the whole game in your hands. Praetorians do not shift.
No. Yeah, and Ashen Dawn are the problem.
I think, the February change, I think, is probably one of the top 5 worst things to happen in my life.
There's your episode title. There's your episode title.
I just think, my memory of playing Old Dominion historically has been, I get out fast, score early, and I try and score as much as I can before I know that the Old Dominion is going to win the second half of the game. So I just need to score a lot and score early. And that experience of having the Praetorians or something just sitting over the objective zone. And so now I'm I'm playing from behind for the whole game, knowing that I'm going to lose, is just this awful experience.
So mad.
It is. Like, true. What's interesting is, just listening to you talking about it and, observing the way that OD plays as an overall army, particularly the way that it has felt like you are always playing from behind in the past. It feels like this now has made the OD army a really nice rounded army where it actually does its job across the entire game. But now the rest of the game needs to sort of catch up with what has then happened, because it feels like there's been a lot of degrading that has been happening in other aspects of the game. And OD has sort of pushed itself forward. So particularly at that 1,500 points where you don't need that much in your dark power pool to get into your tier 2, tier 3, it just makes it scary.
I definitely think at 1,500 points, Old Dominion becomes significantly better. I think so. For those you don't know, for every 250 points less you have in your army, you require 2 less points to hit each tier. So at 1,500 points, you require 4 less points to hit tier 1, and then tier 2, and then tier 3 is also 4 less points. And it's hugely significant. It makes a really big difference, especially hitting that tier 2, because going from needing 9 points to 5 points just means you can get there so quickly. And the reality is the army rule's still the same, so you still get like a point a turn. At 1,500 points, you're probably still running a Hierodeacon, where you can, from turn 2, be casting a spell to get an extra dark power. So I've often played it, and on turn 3, I'm hitting tier 2, and my whole army's getting stronger, and that feels incredibly difficult to play against. Whereas at 2,000 points, trying to get up to 9, even maybe with a unit with a Dark Xenopath, it's still taking me till turn 4, maybe 5 to hit tier 2. And so, that hitting there early is really impactful. And it makes the Fallen Divinity far more playable, because you've got another pool with 4 points off. So you're not just saving 8 points, you're actually saving 12 points, which is just so many tokens. Like that extra 500 points, if you just bought Legionnaires, if you bought like 5 regiments of Legionnaires, that's 15 points. So, basically all of your extra points you'd spend at 2k, you're just spending on chaff to try and help you get up as fast as you would at 1,500.
Sure. So you've still got all the core elements you need. You're now just getting your power in different ways.
Yeah, I think it's... I've played a Fallen Divinity at 1,500 points 2 tournaments this year, and both of them I was undefeated. It feels like a very... And after the February change, it felt like it got stronger.
Yeah, because the Fallen Divinity, when it hits tier 3, is by itself able to deal with almost anything that you throw at it. So the argument in favour of that was, well, look, when it's tier 1, though, it'll die as soon as you touch it.
Oh, yeah, you shoot it, it's gone.
But when it's moving only 4 inches a turn, and at turn 3, it's already at tier 2, so suddenly now it is performing as you would expect any other monster to perform. You're not getting, as an opponent to the OD, you're not getting the benefit of it being weaker, but then you're still having to deal with it being this impossible to destroy.
And as well, the things being lower, only even 5 points to get to tier 2, you can respond a lot quicker. Like I've had games where people start shooting at it, and I think, okay, I'm just going to quickly throw some points into it, get it to the tier higher, heal some wounds back, make it a bit stronger. Whereas again, if you're at 2,000 points and you need to get 9 tokens into it, that can take a few turns to kind of generate. So definitely it's... And I think it's really hard to balance that. I was thinking about this the other day, how you'd balance it, and I couldn't think of an elegant way to do it. I could think of a way to do it, but I just didn't think it was elegant. So I think the way to try and balance it and make it more fair is at lower, at like 1,500 points, you should keep the number of tokens you need the same. So you should still have to have 9 to get to tier 2. But what you should do is you should up your generation. So you'd say get 1 token turn, 1 and 2. But then you'd get 2 tokens a turn from your army rule. Turns 3, 4, 5, 6. You can maybe even give yourself 3 tokens a turn from that point on. Because then the idea is you're still giving yourself the reduction. You're getting these extra bonus tokens because your army's smaller. But you're not accelerating how quickly your army gets to the tiers. And so I think that would make it a little bit fairer. The only thing is it's just not elegant. You'd have to have a table for every different sized army you play at, how many tokens you got to turn, and it'll be impossibly difficult to remember.
I'm going to put you on the spot actually for that there. So what you said there was it may be more balanced. Have we gone too far? Is the Old Dominion arms race of durability versus killing power? Do you think that Old Dominion are above the curve now and need to be dialed back a bit, or do you think that they've landed in a strong position but not an overly powerful position compared to the other factions?
I think it depends what size you play at. So I think for 2,000 points, I'd probably argue they're relatively balanced. I think it's to get up the tiers is still quite a challenge. It still takes quite a few turns. I still struggle to win with a Fallen Divinity list at 2,000 points. I just find you need too many tokens to try and make both your army feel strong enough and then get the Fallen Divinity to tier 3. I do think at 1,500 points they are far above the curve. I think it doesn't feel balanced at 1,500 points. I think they are very, very strong at 1,500 points.
And given you're the defender of LD against all of our criticisms, I think that validates our opinions, doesn't it?
Broken.
I think it is one of the things that gets exacerbated. We talk a lot about the Fallen Divinity, and I think it's a good indication of actually a lot of aspects of Old Dominion. Whatever you don't kill gets stronger. And the longer the game goes on, the more of a threat that becomes. I hate Kerrers. Kerrers are miserable. That insanity spell does so much damage. They're healing on back. They're coming on back. They're hard to remove. They're a fantastic unit. But every time I played against them, if I have not removed them very early on in the game, they have punished me so hard in the end game. When you start getting the additional wounds coming from the rolling 6s on your failed resolve checks, using the lowest unmodified resolve. So if you're looking at big blocks of high armor stuff, but they need a character to buff their resolve, it gets them down, etc. It's a unit that I feel very strongly I have to deal with as early in the game as I can, because if it's at the end, it'll heal back up and it will do damage. But then you've also got the Fallen Divinity. It's also something you got to deal with before it gets too strong. And then you may have Praetorian Guard. If you don't deal with them soon, they're going to be getting to defense 4, even 5 if they can double activate their memories. So you've got multiple things you have to deal with quickly, and at 1,500 points, you have less tools to do that with. So I think from an old Dominion playing into them, that's the kind of challenges. I'm not going to be able to clear everything I want by the end game. What am I going to tolerate? And it's usually I would like to tolerate a lot less, please.
So just to join on the Old Dominion hate train, it's my favourite mode of transportation. So, I feel, I know we talked about this a little bit before, but I feel like my Ashen Dawn, I know obviously there is controversy around them in and of itself, but I feel like my Ashen Dawn, I look at most scenarios, and I realise that is part of the issue. I look at most regiments in most other factions, I'm like, they can deal with that. Do you know what I mean? I'm like comfortable. Like I play Sam if it's spies, or I'm sure when I play Wadroon, obviously I have to watch out for a couple of things, but I feel like most of the stuff, maybe they'd struggle with Incarnate Sentinels, but most things, as long as I'm not dealing with too many turns of Aura of Death, I feel like I'm okay. I've played City States a bunch recently in tournaments, and it's just been no problem. Like you just keep them away from the Therians, and you're okay. I feel like when I play Old Dominion, especially the list that Josh runs, because you are brilliant at taking the things that are really good and just like leaning into them. I've never played against Kerry's. Actually, no, I have. I did play against Alex's Kerry's, so shout out to him. But yeah, I feel like I don't want them to go into Bone Golems because of Aura of Death. I don't want them to go into Varangians because Cleave 3, like, great, bless those ones. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not, you're not defending anything. I go into Canophores. Great, it's now, you've got flawless strikes, right? So it rolls of 1 on the attack, just ignore defense. Then you've got, I think, honestly, the worst thing, maybe apart from Varangians, is the, what is it, the Caryatids.
Yeah.
And it's like, volley, a bunch of shots, really long range, and AP2, and it's just like, great, bless that. So that is I think that's a marker for me. But I also think I find it such a skewy thing. But I play lists like that where it's like stuff that is big and heavy and beefy just gets absolutely wiped. But I run a bunch of mercenary crossbowmen and I win the game. And I'm just like, it's so like, you've almost like leaned with the current way Old Dominion have gone. It seems like they've leaned into the big, strong, heavy stuff. But then like the kind of weakness that they had before against like shooting and like maybe magic and stuff like that is still definitely there. So I mean, we played a game the other day. I think it was, to be fair, it was a Fallen Divinity list at 2,000 points, and I basically killed her straight away, and then it was just kind of happy sailing from then on, really. So yeah, I feel like they are really strong in a lot of scenarios, but then really weak still in a few others.
I think that's where new players struggle, because I know that's one thing they've said is like, it can feel really oppressive for new players. I think you got to know the right tools to kill them. So they are very vulnerable to shooting. So yeah, I remember you brought the list. You had 3 light shooting. You came out and, I mean, you just peppered my Fallen Divinity to pieces before she even got a chance to hit tier 2. And then she was gone. And then you just started peppering other stuff. And it was just horrible for me to, like, that was just a really hard one to play against. I know, like, again, Sam did it to me the other game. He had, your marksman clones just started shooting across the table at the Fallen Divinity, just took her out before she had any impact in the game. Aura of Death, I know, is like awful against my heavies. Again, Sam gave a bunch of 4-square drones, wasn't it? Aura of Death 4. I remember you like marched and charged against my Canophores. You did like 2 or 3 wounds to them. Next turn I activated them, and before they got to do anything, Aura of Death just wiped them out. And that felt brutal because it's 4-square drones against like an elite heavy unit. But so I think you've got to, I think that's the difficult thing about them, is they've got certain weaknesses that you can like definitely exploit and do, and hurt them with, shooting being a big one. And it's just hard, obviously, building a balanced army for a tournament, right? Because you want to take your Ashen Dawn, because against every other faction, they're going to be really impactful for you. But the game against Old Dominion, you're going to get your least value from them because they've just got so many tools against Ashen Dawn. But it's then your Longbowmen that you kind of snuck in, that against a few other lists, you felt like, they didn't really do much. You just know you're going to get your value from them in that game. So I think that's got to be a big thing of them, is that they're just knowing the right tools to use against them.
I think if you listen very quietly, you can hear the world's tiniest violin playing a sad song for the Ashen Dawn having a sad time. We're all in for jumping on and kicking in Old Dominion here, but Ashen Dawn probably aren't going to be the ones we want to see buffed to be able to deal with it. But I think actually what you're saying about shooting and Aura of Death, one of the key things there is those are abilities that specifically do not cause resolve damage. Now, obviously, Old Dominion do not take resolve damage. Controversial in this room. One person says it's great, the other 3 of us say it's not. But in terms of from a game design perspective, all of your attacks, spells, and clashes, impacts are all designed and this could do a subsequent wound based off resolve. So all of those attacks that do resolve damage could be 20 to 50% less efficient into Old Dominion. Things that don't cause resolve damage, shooting, Aura of Death, don't effectively pay or pay for an effect they're not getting. So it's another reason I think why shooting, aura of death, things that don't rely on resolve damage to punch through their value's worth of damage, are particularly effective into Old Dominion because it's a more efficient way of putting damage in. As a thought to offer there.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And the point is about how do you pull together a balanced army when you're going to be facing every single different opponent. And so, even I was listening to the conversation and I think, man, I really don't bring much ranged at all. I tend to have one MSU of marksman clones. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, you got to try those VCIs out, mate.
Yeah, I've still got them, haven't I? And I almost never use them. So I think if I were running against you with your OD, I think, hey, I could lean quite heavily into a whole bunch of ranged stuff and then something with Aura of Death and something with Lethal Demise maybe. Because, I mean, even that, it does cause resolve, but it's something that's a little bit more passive. That's probably the way that I would have to deal with you. And it's the only way I've ever really killed your Fallen Divinity that I can remember. But that sort of list would crumble against most other armies out there.
Which I think comes into sort of the more general point, is you need a plan for Old Dominion at the moment. Old Dominion is in a really great spot, particularly at that smaller points level. We haven't even talked about the fact that you'll get +1 to your reserve rolls, which in an event setting makes your arrival of units much more consistent. It may not appear in one game, but over the course of your tournaments, I'm sure the fact you've had the +1 hit has actually been quite relevant for getting reliably units on when you want them. So you need to have a plan for Old Dominion if you're going to an event and you're expecting to see Old Dominion. And it may involve taking units that are heavy on range or of death, have some of these tools we've talked about, I think, to help give you that fighting chance. If you just drive Ashen Dawn down the middle of the road and expect them to win everything, they will. Except against Old Dominion. If you agree, Josh, from the Old Dominion perspective, does that sound
definitely Old Dominion lists are often medium heavy. Like, we haven't got many good lights. There's a few on the way out, but I've often run like 5 or 6 mediums in a list. Well, when it goes from rolling 2s to 3s, that consistently means at least an extra regiment on per turn, which is hugely impactful. Because definitely before, I remember at the first tournament I played this year, 1,500 points before that rule was included, I had a lot of turn 2s where I had 1 medium on the board. That was it. And it was a list that had a strong late game and I could kind of push people off some objectives and catch up. But being able to consistently get more on earlier with that extra roll is really helpful. And they're an army that's got a lot of good heavy options. And so wanting to run more heavies is definitely tempting with the options out there. And again, now rolling 3s rather than 2s means if you had, like, say, 3 heavy regiments, you're on an average game, you're going to get 1 auto and then 1 other one on a turn 3, which is again very impactful. So that is. I think people can look at it first and just think, it's only 1 extra roll to the dice. But it does change things. It does mean now, on an average game, you only need to have 2 units to likely get 1 on rather than 3. And that's a big difference when list building.
I think it's specifically in events where this really comes in because one of the big things about playing an event is you're playing multiple games. Winning 1 game isn't as impactful because you've got to win multiple of them if you want to go and win an event. So having an army that behaves consistently, my current army has, I think it makes 1 reserve roll across the entire game for 1,500 points. Everything has flank or is otherwise set up that I will have everything in guaranteed in by turn 4, or at least so I can pick to have everything in because I want that much. And I've invested a lot of points in that. So similar kind of thing there. The fact that you can have much more reliability over when units are coming in will add up to more consistent gameplay out of your list. And it's really rewarding, I think, to see. It's really cool to see across the table, even if unpleasant sometimes.
One of my most memorable games against OD was at the most recent LGT where I played the arch nemesis of our podcast, Chris.
Of course, Chris.
And he was playing OD. He brought out some Legionnaires, but that was turn 2. Maybe it was turn 3. Actually, they'd come on. They moved up a little bit, and then I used some unstable enhancement to push myself right up against him. And so the whole game was played out certainly on his side of the board, and I was sending things in behind it, so I was scoring the points exactly as you would expect it to. Post rules change, with an earlier roll and then Vanguard and every other thing that OD has suddenly got, even if we played exactly the same list with exactly the same results, the entire game would have been played 12 inches closer to me. And so did the game even played exactly the same from turn 1 to turn 10, it would have just gone the exact opposite way. So it's, we need to think about it, don't we?
The thing I'm finding more and more about Conquest is, like, once a regiment is in combat, it's like that's where the combat happens for the rest of the game, and it just like it stays there, and it's like I don't appreciate this as much during my gameplay. But yeah, when I think about it, sometimes I feel bad about just running up some mount of squires to immediately die, but I'm like, that means that the engagement line is actually kind of just over the edge of the middle objectives, and it means I can happily score them for the rest of the game, and it like. I guess, yeah, stuff's super sticky in Conquest, and I think that's like something that I feel like I'm kind of coming to terms with, I guess, and understanding a bit better.
Oh, definitely. And I remember before the rules update, me and you were practicing for the tournament in Southampton, and I remember, back when my army was slower then, I think we played 3 practice games, and I lost every single one to you the exact same way. You got up the board early, you put some units like to the point where I couldn't get onto the objective, and then you moved other stuff behind. So as soon as I killed one thing, you moved the next thing in, and you just set the line of combat there. And it was
just fed you like
just
my army just have some dark power.
I remember like 3 games in a row I like tabled you turn 9. And 3 games in a row, I was like, great, I've killed his whole army and lost the game. So I do think there's probably a balance that needs to happen there. Of like, it does feel like it's probably the pendulum swung slightly one way to the other. Definitely with the Strategos. I like the fact they wanted to try and make that character more playable. But yeah, the last Bad Moon tournament, every single game I had that block of Praetorians on the objective turn 2. And then most of the games turn 3. Sitting right on the edge, as you said, so that someone has to walk through 6 stands of Praetorians. I think they had dread as well. Like it was just a horrible thing to do, and it was basically the rule that won me every single game. Like just that one character, the Strategos, getting them with Praetorians, and just scoring me, like getting me a score lead as a late game army. I think that's probably one of the most impactful rule changes that's made the biggest difference.
That's the thing, though, right? Like you mentioned the pendulum. It's all pendulum. It swings and roundabouts, right? Like factions will become stronger and then weaker, and then stronger and then weaker. And I think Old Dominion were quite weak for a while, and then they became strong again. I think actually City States, when they first came out, like won a bunch of tournaments because I think they capitalised a lot on the like, shooting rules or something like that.
They did the shooting update.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing the lists from that tournament. And like the Nords guy came second, had a 90% shooting list. And the next guy had a shooting list. OD scored low, but there was this City States army. And the guy had this way where using characters and stuff, he just got them.
Oh, he's fighting the shade, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's like a thing, and it just removes all damage.
And so he just walked through that tournament being like, yeah, that's fine. Like, shoot as many arrows as you want.
But obviously now they're in a state where they're kind of less competitive. And I think actually, you go all sorts of ways. I remember when 100 Kingdoms, all you played was 2 big blocks of Household Knights and then some other stuff. And now that's definitely not the way you play them anymore. Maybe you have 1 brick and 1 MSU at the most, but like stuff changes. And I think in general, I obviously haven't played a bunch of war games, but what I keep hearing and what I experience really is that in general, Conquest is a pretty balanced game. I feel like you can go into most tournaments with a middling faction, and if your skill level is good enough, you can probably win that faction, win that tournament. I feel like you often keep seeing the same names. Obviously there's this thing about Carl always coming second in tournaments, right? But like you'll see the same names. That's because they're brilliant war gamers. And I think it's yeah. The faction obviously plays a big part. The meta plays a big part, but I think the skill level plays just as much, if not more, of a part.
Yeah, well, I think it's particularly apparent against Old Dominion, because Old Dominion has got its unique thing with the dark power levels, just like Wadrun has got chanting and Spires has got pheromancies, and we've got rituals now entering the game as well. But the big thing that makes a difference against Old Dominion is the lack of resolve means that the strategies that work against every other army don't work. So if I charge you in the flank, you don't care and are probably quite grateful, because then that's exposing my flank to a charge from you. Whereas against every other army, that's the best thing to do. If I can get you in the flank, I've probably won this battle. And so the fact that it isn't even just, it's sort of at every level of the game, it's in building an army list. If I've got enough range, that's probably going to help. While I'm playing the game, I've got to be thinking, don't do the things that work in every other situation. I've got to completely rethink it.
They definitely feel like for new players, it's quite a forgiving army to play. I think quite a few of the units are relatively strong. But then for a new player to play against, it is one of those ones where, yeah, you've got to know the certain ways to beat them. And that's going to be, I think, particularly hard for Old Dominion. I do think it's a little bit the case with lots of other armies. I do think first time I played Wadrun, I really struggled not understanding the chance. And then suddenly out of nowhere, them doing a lot of damage. So, but it is a very prevalent rule that's all the way across the army. The no resolve is a big thing to think about when you face them. And if you haven't played the game before and you've got a million other things that you're trying to process, it is probably a harsh first army to play against.
And I think the other side is like we're talking about, certain types of attacks are less efficient into Old Dominion compared to other stuff.
Yeah.
Shooting, Aura of Death, those things gain a load of value. If you have Apex Predator. Apex Predator's great, cleave 2, deadly blades, awesome at killing stuff. Except actually they really could do with that terrifying 2, getting a lot of value out of those attacks. So there's 11 attacks go up further. So something that should be quite good at hunting monsters. Having played a recent game, I was going to send an Apex Predator into a Fallen Divinity. Realised it's a really bad idea. The maths is terrible. So I think this is where a bit of experience in list design does help. You probably do need to take some slightly different tools to have some effectiveness into Old Dominion. If no one's playing it in your area and your meta, don't worry about it. You absolutely don't need to bring an Old Dominion answer to be able to compete at a local event. If you want to go to Chios and play in the World Championships, you probably need to be thinking about Old Dominion at the moment. And you need to make sure that your list has a way of responding to it without overcommitting the other way.
Yeah.
Bring some shooting, you'll be fine.
Bring your own Old Dominion. Fight fire with fire.
Yeah, another Old Dominion.
I definitely also understand losing Terrifying is horrible, because like the Fallen Divinity gets up to Terrifying 3, and that's a big part of her damage. Like she should do as much basically from resolve as from attacks. And when I've played other Old Dominion players, her, usually should be doing like 20 wounds, and now she's doing like 10. You're like, oh yeah, it's going to take her a lot longer to get through this unit than I thought.
That's how it feels.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm getting a little taste of my medicine here. I don't like it.
That's great. Brilliant. Well, Jamie, it's been a pleasure having you for these last 3 episodes. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure, gents, and great to get on the cast and see you all.
Oh, brilliant. So, Jamie, would you like to? Do you know our email address? Would you like to share that?
I haven't guessed it.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
If you have any comments, likes, shares, subscribes, criticisms, just want to whinge about Old Dominion with the rest of us,
Yes.
please send all of this on to joshingaroundinair@gmail.com.
Smashed it. Great. Thank you so much for coming, Jamie. And thank you to you, listeners, for listening. And we'll see you next time.
See you next one.
See you next time.
Chugging brews, fresh and bold. Banter silver, but our takes are gold. Roll the dice on tails tonight. Bone golems got a date in sight. Tacticians at the table side. Conquest battles our source of pride. Echoes loud in empty space. Each episode a new embrace. I'm hooked on joshing around in mythical EA. let the journey unfold. Whispers of adventure and stories untold. With a clink and a cheer, we found a new drink. Not Josh with a smirk who gives us a wink. Voices clash like swords in fight. In joshing around, we feel just right.